practice saying those names, Yasmin? Good girl. Okay, okay, we're live.
Practice makes perfect.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jael Mohara, and I will be one of the interviewers for today's conversation. Thank you for being here with us in this live. And now I would like to introduce our panelists for today's conversation. Please welcome Linda LeGerrette, our Executive Director for the Cesar Chavez Service Club, our former staff member of the United Farm Workers and United Domestic Workers of America. Now, Carlos LeGerrette, our co-founder of Cesar Service Clubs and former staff member of the United Farm Workers, including as personal assistant of Cesar Chavez. Now, last but not least, welcome Ken Msemaji, our co-founder and president emeritus of the United Domestic Workers of America, former staff member of Labor's Local 89 and Sheet Metal Workers Local 206, and our president of the board of Cesar Chavez Club. Now, also let me introduce our interviewers for today's conversation. Please welcome Martin Payido and Sanjana Ganguly. Now we will be starting with our conversation. Martin Payido will be the first interviewer.
Hello, hi, I'm Martin Piatto, and I am historian for the for Edison Elementary School. Thank you, and I thank you.
So I think we need our first question.
Or does Sanjana introduce herself?
Hi, I'm Sanjana Ganguly Fitzgerald. I'm the chair of the Schools and Community Resources Committee of the Cesar Chavez Club Congress, and I'm also the member of the Roosevelt Middle School Chavez Club. So thank you for having me.
Okay, so Martin, I think you can ask your first question, right?
Yeah. So, Ken,
Yes.
Mr. Ken, what do you remember being a kid my age, 11 years old?
I had a very significant lawn cutting business at that time. I made a lot of money. Could you hear that?
Yeah. How about some more little tidbits of your early age there, Ken?
I used to have to, there was a big vacant lot at the intersection of at the boulevard. They built a bunch of apartments there. Everything else was residential. And so because the apartments had poor families, the residential wanted to beat up those kids. So I had to try to negotiate between the two and teach the apartment kids how to fight. I had a very healthy growing up environment. My family came from the Caribbean. I am the second one born in the United States on my mother's side. And of course, my wife and co-founder of United Domestic Workers, Bahati Jeffers, rest in peace and power.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
So should I go next or should Mr. Carlos go next, Martin? Okay, I guess I'll go. So I think Martin's question was, what do I remember about being a kid at 11 years old? So I remember when I was a kid at 11 years old, I was really quite mature for 11 years old because there were 7 of us in the family. And by the time I was born, 2 of them were already gone out of the house. They were old enough to leave the house, but I had a lot of responsibility at an 11-year-old. And I think that's what kind of made me just kind of be just kind of take on responsibility and be a little bit competitive in my life because my younger siblings were boys. And so I had 3 boys that I had to contend with all the time. I remember that as a kid that we had a loving family, but I also remember there were hard times in our families. My father was an alcoholic, and so it was made for some interesting moments in our life. But like anything else, you know, now I know that using that be creative value was helpful even then. And my dad wasn't a bad man. He just had this issue about drinking. And so, but it, you know, it caused a lot of turmoil in the family. I just remember also that in order to help our family with financial stuff, I used to like clean houses. So at 11 years old, I was, like I said, I was really mature. So people trusted me to like clean their house and to babysit their kids because I had a younger sibling, so they knew I could do it. So I was always able to, my parents at that time wouldn't take any money from me, but it did help them because it helped me purchase the things that I wanted for myself that they weren't able to give me money for. So, and I always bought stuff for the family. So that's what I remember. I remember traveling to North Carolina when I was a little girl because my dad was in the service. And I remember that we had really great experiences from that and some not so great experiences that. From California to North Carolina, once we got to North Carolina, the majority of our experiences were good. It was traveling in some of the states getting to North Carolina that was a challenge for our family because we were from California. My aunt was with us and my uncle and my siblings. And so we looked very different than a lot of people that we saw as we were traveling to North Carolina. But all in all, I feel blessed because of the childhood that I had, because I think part of it allowed me to be resilient. Part of it allowed me to sort of could take control when I needed to or had to. Sometimes I have to be held back doing that, but that's just kind of how I am. So yeah, that's my experience at 11 years old. I also do remember this too, Martin. I remember that when we lived in, we got back from North Carolina, we moved into a house in Claremont. And I remember that when I made friends in Claremont, I would go to my friend's house and they had like really nice houses with carpet, and on their counter in their kitchen was a big bowl of fresh fruit. And in our house, we didn't have that. We had sort of like, I don't know, we didn't have carpet. So whatever the floor was when they built the house was that. We had rugs, but not like fancy rugs, like throw rugs. And so, and my mom didn't have a fruit bowl because there were so many of us. If she put fruit out there, it'd be gone in 2 seconds. So I always just love to go to my friend's house because I just always thought that was like the coolest thing ever, seeing that big bowl of fruit like plums and peaches and fruit that we didn't get to eat so much. So yeah, I'm sure my time is up. So go ahead.
So it goes to me.
Mm-hmm. You, Mr. Carlos.
Well, I think first, I think it being Labor Day, we should maybe dedicate today's conversation to all those labor leaders who are no longer with us and whose shoulders we stand on. So I take great pride in knowing quite a few, having known quite a few of them. And so I think it'd be appropriate that we do recognize their efforts. Growing up, 11 years old, it was difficult. There's similarities in Linda's family and my family. My dad was also an alcoholic, wasn't around very much. My mother, there was 5 boys. I was the baby of the 5, and so she was a single parent, a single mom, and so there were always money issues growing up, and when you have money issues, you have to there's some things that don't get paid for or bought. Food is one that becomes an issue. Rent is an issue. Being evicted is an issue. Going to the doctor is an issue. All of those things that come from not having enough money to, run the family. And I don't know how my mom did it, but thank God it was her, because she did a fabulous job in raising us without much money. I don't know, for some unknown reason, I was able to stay above the fray and kind of outside of those issues. I was a good student, popular in school. And so even though the family was dissolving, because at the same time, my parents divorced after, excuse me, after 25 years of marriage. So even while all that stuff is going on, I was able to remain a good student. And so in the 4th grade, I had the opportunity came up to run for homeroom representative. And I did, and I won. The following year, I figured, well, that was okay. I did okay. So the vice presidency was available and so I took out, the papers and signed up and ran a campaign, and I won being vice president of the school. That was great. The next year, I ran for president and won. So I was very successful with those being able to win those 3 elections. My parents' background, both born in California, and cannery workers, musician. My dad was a musician, and so my time is up. So I'll go to the next question.
Thank you so much for those answers. The next question is, what inspired you to become part of the labor movement? And do you remember when you first met Cesar Chavez?
I first met Cesar Chavez in 1972. I didn't know what a labor union was or what it did. Cesar was a civil rights leader to me, and that's how I got involved with him, and over time learned what a union did. He and his wife wanted us to start a union for domestic workers, because farm workers' wives were domestic workers, and they knew all the horror stories. Everybody said it was impossible to build a union for domestic workers, a whole range of reasons, starting with how do you find them? It's not like working in a hospital or a convalescent home. They're all over the place in private homes. So people thought it was impossible. I didn't understand the reasons why it was impossible. I just believed in Cesar, and he trained me and the rest of us, and we built the union and ran it its first 28 years. Labor itself wasn't very helpful at that time. The biggest union in the country spent 15 years trying to either stamp us out or take us over. And so the experience with some of the labor movement wasn't positive. On the other hand, the United Farm Workers and several of the religious groups were very helpful in our building the labor movement. I mean, our labor union. Hattie Jeffers became the operational officer. She ran the day-to-day operations. She also became an attorney because Cesar suggested we have our own attorney. And he suggested the smartest one of us go to law school. She was the smartest one of us. And so she went to law school and still did 50 hours a week building the United Domestic Workers. So as far as labor concerned, I knew nothing about labor. I just wanted to help Cesar.
Okay. So should I go?
Go ahead.
Okay, so the question is, what inspired me to become part of the labor movement? And do you remember when you met Cesar Chavez? Yeah, actually, I met Cesar Chavez before, like Ken, before I knew what a labor movement or labor union really was. I do remember that in our household when I was a child, you know, my cousins and their husbands and some of my mom and dad's friends would come over. They used to sit around the table, and of course there was always beer, and there would be these big arguments, these big conversations. They got very loud about whether or not people should join a union. My dad was a huge believer in unions. He was in the painters union, but he was born in Russia, and he got his citizenship by going into the military, and then came out and became a member of the painters union. So I always had an idea in my head that unions were good because, you know, they had good hours and good pay and that and protection and that sort of thing. But I never thought of it past that. When Carlos and I were in college, we went to Delano to help supporting farm workers who were on strike. And it was one of those caravans where we took clothing and food to the farm workers, where we met Cesar Chavez. And that did it for me. Cesar Chavez came from behind the room where all the students were all gathered in this big community room. And Cesar Chavez came out in between two guys. One, the first guy in the procession was like this tall white guy named Reverend Jim Drake. Then it was Cesar Chavez. And then I can't remember, it was somebody else. And so he made a presentation to thank all of the students for taking the clothes and the food to everybody. And then he basically said, when you go home, what's more important than joining the cause of farm workers? And like Ken, I didn't join it because it was a labor movement. I joined it because it was Cesar Chavez and farm workers. And like Ken, I do remember those days when we had no help from the labor movement in the beginning. It was only when we started really working and proving ourselves. And when I say ourselves, I don't mean me personally. I mean when farm workers really sort of took it upon themselves to become organized and to want to, you know, fight for their own rights and stuff. When that happened, then I saw how labor union in some cases started to respect the farm workers. And it was a different thing. So we kind of like, you know, we sort of like made friends with people in the labor movement during that time, but it wasn't easy at the very beginning because we were unlike any other labor movement or, a different type of worker. You know, these are people who didn't have a union hall. The farm workers didn't have a union hall. They were always in the fields. And so, you know, working because they traveled a lot, you know, to follow the crops so they could make money. It was a really hard life. And as we got, you know, so as I, you know, grew up in that part of the movement is when I began to develop then a respect for labor unions. But they had to work really hard for it because, like I said in the beginning, it wasn't necessarily a good beginning for us, but we learned how to work together. And so I will, you know, I of course now will always respect the workers' right to organize and to join a union. And most unions out there have great leaderships and great workforce. It's the workers that I really respect in the labor union movement.
When me personally, I was already involved with labor in the labor movement. I was a union steward for the United Rubber Workers Union for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. So we built tires, and I had gone to Salinas to work up there to make money to come back to San Diego to marry my high school sweetheart, Linda LeGerrette. And so, I was very inspired by the camaraderie that we had in the union, and how we were able to make change within the factory through concerted actions and so forth. So, when it came time to do the things that we were doing with the farm workers in terms of support, taking clothing and food and so forth, it was something. It wasn't too difficult, at least for me, in terms of the background of being involved with labor. And meeting Cesar Chavez, I really don't remember when I met Cesar Chavez. I had seen him at the Filipino Hall, and but I don't remember like the date that I met him. I really became to know Cesar very, very well after he called us, asking us to leave San Diego to relocate to the farm workers movement to help him follow up with the policies of the union. And I became his assistant. And so we were together, 24/7, sometime 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time, with an entourage that, accompanying us, a lot of security people because of the threats on Cesar's life. But I wasn't so much impressed with Cesar as I was with those individuals around Cesar Chavez. And the reason being is that those were individuals that Congressman John Lewis would call individuals who made good trouble. And I was good at making trouble because I was a troublemaker in high school. And so I immediately identified with those troublemakers. And so that was kind of like my first real contact with the organizers. And that was like Gilbert Padilla and Dolores Huerta, Marshall Gans, I said Marshall's name, Eliseo Medina, but quite a few of them. So, and I never saw the Farm Workers Union as a labor union. I always thought it as a people's march, not people's march, but a people's movement.
Thank you, panelists, for telling us your experience. Now I'll be asking another question. What are you most proud of in your work in the labor movement?
There was no labor law that included domestic workers of any kind, including domestic home care workers. And we had, with the home care workers, the state would send money to the county and they would use it to hire domestics to take care of elderly and disabled people so they wouldn't have to go into a nursing home. But they avoided being the employer. They would lie and say they weren't the employer, they were just trying to help out the elderly and disabled. So we had some enormous challenges like that. It took us almost 20 years to get a collective bargaining law passed that gave the legal right for bargaining to domestics. Very, very happy about that. But more than that, I was very happy that we were able to make progress on Cesar's twin dream. He always said that if he hadn't been successful organizing farm workers, he was going to try to organize domestics. Later on, when we had the collective bargaining bill going on, there was a lot of friction among some of us, particularly the biggest union that was always trying to take us over. And we had to come up with a way to win despite them. It wasn't just them. They were able to get all kinds of others to be against us, usually lying like politicians do. And we wanted anyhow. When the California State Senate has 40 senators, when our law came up for its final vote on the floor of the state Senate, we had 36 yes votes and the other 4 weren't in the building that day. And the assembly side, it was about 82% yes. Democrats, Republicans, we found a way to get most of those elected officials to support us. I was also proud that my wife, Fahadi, knew a little bit more starting out than I did about unions. But about organizing, I knew a lot more about that than her at the time. Everything I ever taught her in the early days, she became as good or better than me in it later on. And again, at the end, when we left after 28 years, we had 114 employees, 11 offices around the state, and she ran the day-to-day operation like clockwork. I was so happy that she was able to be herself, and I was so happy that she felt that I had done a good job.
So what I'm most proud of in my work in the labor movement is really not really the labor movement per se, but the movement, you know, which includes a lot of labor. Like I said earlier, I will always believe in the rights of workers to organize. And like Carlos said earlier, I honor the people who I met before I was around to do this work, and who helped secure, you know, fair wages and hours and treatment by employers. That to me is really what a good labor movement is about. When you really have the workers, when you really understand that you work for the workers, if you're part of a labor movement, it's kind of like the Chavistas, you know. It's like you guys, you panel, you interviewers know this, that our most important job with the Chavistas is that we respect all of our Chavistas, and you guys are who we work for. So that's why, like in the labor movement, that's why you have to always remember that you have to use your voice, that you'll always have to remember how powerful your voice is. And you also have to remember that your voice matters. And it's so important for never forget that, because in the labor movement, I think that's part of what I'm the most proud of, is that the people that I had the opportunity to work with, and Ken, you know, and Fahari's co-founder of the UDW, the United Domestic Workers, I worked for them for a while. And I'm proud to say that he carried on the legacy through the United Domestic Workers Union, as Cesar Chavez and others, so many others, like Carlos said, worked with the farm workers. And I will forever be grateful for that. So in my head, what I'm most proud of is that I still feel it's important that we honor our workers every single day, and that we always have to work hard to make sure that they get a good, you know, good money, fair hours, and fair treatment by the employers. So that's kind of my thing with the workers, labor movement.
My proudest moments working with labor was learning, excuse me, learning how to work with people, because it's not always easy working with people, especially a lot of different individuals. But being able to take those lessons that we learned and be like the values of the movement. You know, how do you incorporate the values of respect, the values of nonviolence, the values of determination, another very critical one of innovation, of being creative, of, you know, how do you put those all together, and also, you know, learning from the mistakes that you make. You know, we learn a lot more from our mistakes than we do our successes. And so anybody who's organized before has had mistakes and have had failures as well as successes. And but in that, you know, Cesar and the farm workers movement really created a mindset within ourselves that there wasn't too much that we couldn't do. You know, he taught us, you know, how to build something where something didn't exist before. And two examples of that, Brother Msemaji, United Domestic Workers Union. You know, they said that couldn't be done. And then the other is the Cesar Chavez Service Clubs. The service clubs is another, you know, thing that was never around, and it is now. You know, we've had over 10,000 Chavistas who we've been able to serve. over, since 2001. And then, the lessons that we learned working in the labor movement are lessons that, we are passing on to our Chavistas. And, the Chavistas are the ones who are carrying on the legacy of Cesar Chavez and the farm workers movement, which began back in 1965. Go to the next question.
What is the hardest thing in the labor movement?
The hardest thing for us in the building of the United Domestic Workers, again, there was no collective bargaining law. Finding the workers was almost impossible. The government blocked the opportunity for the workers to have a legal employer. The people who said it was impossible, they were right. Cesar just taught us how to do it anyway. And Cesar had people like Fred Ross and his brothers, Richard and Manuel Chavez, Gilbert Padilla, Dolores Huerta, Mac Lyon, several of them all helped us learn very quickly what we had to learn in order to be successful building the movement. I'll never forget what Cesar said, Brother Ken, if you have a question or a problem that you need to talk to me about, if you can't find me, just go and find Carlos and Linda LeGerrette. I trust them completely and they'll know what to do. And that was incredibly important to us. I knew a little bit about Carlos and Linda before, but not a lot. And as it turned out, Linda's mother, who didn't have to work after she was lived with Carlos and Linda, but she wanted to work as a domestic. And she was the first one to sign a UDW representation card. So the hardest thing was kind of all those, but most of all, over those 28 years, we had to work, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, sometimes more. And it was like being in a campaign, like a big campaign, like helping somebody become governor of California, except there was no election day. For 28 years, we did that. And I don't know how we did it, but we did. It was extremely difficult, but it was rewarding because the workers are amazing. They're brilliant. Their passion for human beings, particularly elderly and disabled people, they will do anything to care for those people, even if they don't get paid. Their family lives was incredible to watch because they had everything against them, but no matter what happened, they remained good anyway. So Cesar also said, when you don't know what to do, just go someplace and get with some workers and just kind of start a conversation. And as that conversation goes, you'll learn what to do. But we were so lucky to have all of those people, and I'm not remembering everybody. Richard Ibarra is the one that told Cesar to watch us because we were good organizers, and it was just so many people that helped us. Richard Ibarra's mother was on staff for a while, so it was difficult. It was impossible, but with Cesar and the others, we learned how to do it anyway.
So for me, one of the hardest parts about working in a labor movement was being patient, because I learned early on that in order to accomplish what your goal is, and in this case, it was to unionize farm workers for all the right reasons, right? Better pay, health benefits, great working conditions, cold water, the field toilets, that sort of stuff. I kind of wanted it to happen overnight. So the hardest part for me was just to hold back and think about being patient. It all takes time, because doing that kind of work, organizing and being part of a labor movement or any kind of a movement, it's a science. It doesn't just happen because it happens. It happens because you worked it, you plan it, and I think what Ken said at the very end of his statement right now was that you keep the workers involved in the process, because workers know what workers, and your job is just to sort of help implement that and spread it out so all the workers get to have the same experiences at the work, because workers know. So I think that was one of the things that was the hardest part. And the other part was that sometimes I wanted to just like shake a tree, because I couldn't understand why it was so difficult for people to understand how important it was that workers had rights. I mean, I still don't get that. You know, I just still don't get that. So for me, it's hard to even deal with that today. So that's why I will, like I said, always be a proponent of workers' rights, but I wish everybody had that same sort of like compassionate, passionate, because there's nothing wrong with being successful in your job, you know, in your business or whatever. We would love for, you know, everybody to go out and make a lot of money, and then to help and be great philanthropists to help people, you know, work on injustice or social justice issues and that sort of thing. But that's really hard for me to understand, why it's so difficult for so many people who don't understand how important it is for working people to be respected, to be able to make a livable wage, to be able to have health benefits, to be able to educate their children and themselves. I mean, that's the hardest part. And even though we've accomplished so much in that arena, there's still so much more work to do. So I think that for me, that's something that's still difficult.
The hardest part of working in the movement, I think there's a lot of pieces to that, but I think first you have to understand what the work day, what your work schedule is. And, you know, and I would say a very similar path with the United Farm Workers Union and the United Domestic Workers Union. And, you know, your work week is probably 60 to 80 hours a week. You have almost no free time. You're making $5 a week in room and board. That's the same amount that Cesar Chavez made. You're working, you know, the long hours. You know, work was so demanding that many times you'd still have some of that $5 in your pocket at the end of the week, you know, because you didn't have time to spend it. I think the hardest part, I think, is the sacrifice. And it's not the sacrifice of those who are doing the organizing. You know, they're doing what they want to do, right? And they're enjoying doing what they're doing and organizing. But the ones who sacrifice are the family and the friends. And, you know, for example, we left, give you an example of our daughter, Tonantzin, 5 years of her early life, from 2 years old to 7 years old. She was away from her family and friends, with the exception of Linda and I. And so it's, I think, you know, being separated from friends, from family, it would have been nice to have had more time with family, with friends. But there's a quote from a movie that I appreciated, and the individual said that you know, that you've chosen the life that you live. That we chosen our life to be organizers, and so don't complain. And you know, we didn't. You know, it was a good life, but it was life we voluntarily chose. Next question.
Thank you. The next question is, what should the labor movement be doing today to inspire young people to get involved?
one of the things that the labor movement, probably unconsciously though, when they are out making speeches, bragging about what labor has done over the years, they very seldom mention the labor unions that were built by people of color. A. Philip Randolph and the Sleeping Car Porters, a long time ago, was the first one. He was African American. And then, of course, Cesar Chavez and the Farm Workers Union, and then Fahadi Jefferson, Greg Akili, Raquel Beltran, and myself with the Domestic Workers Union. And they waited so long to help us. But what they need to do today, in my opinion, is to face the reality. One reality is that over time, most societies are going to become more like the dominating force, more like the power structure than themselves. And that happens with church, with academia, labor, across the board. But the other thing is to face the facts and be honest about them and don't hide them. When I was growing up in Watts, that's a section of LA, in the 1950s and 60s, labor had 35% of American workers were in labor unions. And that is without public employees. They couldn't organize at that time. Today, it's about, I don't know, 11, 12, 13% are in labor unions with public employees. Labor has to be honest with itself and face why is that? What happened? What did we do well and what did we do wrong? And unfortunately, human nature makes us want to hide and cover up our mistakes and weaknesses as opposed to facing them. I think labor has to face itself and has to learn from the people left out, like our people, and has to definitely learn from young people, but not young people who have been almost brainwashed by older labor leaders, young people who think for themselves, who got involved in something in high school, who are involved in their own community, who play a leadership role in their family. Get real young people, real workers, and tell the truth to each other. And maybe, just maybe, labor might be able to turn itself around.
So when we were young, you know, Cesar Chavez and the farm worker movement put out a call to young people to ask for help in building the farm worker movement, the labor movement, as it turns out. And I think today it would be amazing to see labor leaders and labor unions really reaching out to people in the community. You know what? There are so many amazing jobs and careers paths that kids or young people or anybody can have in the labor movement, especially those things that really help all of us, building roads, all the service employees, the hotel workers, all the janitors, teachers. There's so many arenas out there. And if you, if there was some way in which to recruit people and make them understand that this is not only a respectful job, it's a great career path. And it pays well, and you do good stuff, and it has good pensions, and you know, you just, so there, I guess my big thing is I would love to see the labor movement figure out a way in which to recruit young people in the high school, even middle school, because people who like to work with their hands, I mean, electricians, stage hands. There was an article in yesterday's paper, I think, about stage hands. We have a wonderful union in San Diego called the IATSE, and they work with all the stage hands and all the people that do all the behind the scene kind of stuff when people are on stage. And these are all really important technical jobs, and they deserve it. So I think the working force, like Ken said, and the membership in the labor unions, because it's dwindling away, there's got to be a way and you know, for labor movements and labor unions to figure out how to recruit people, because they are honorable jobs and great careers, and you even get a pension after you've worked so hard for so many years. So I think, you know, and I think that, you know, workers have to really be able to feel included in the leadership of their labor movement. You know, that workers should always have a strong voice and determine the things that are best for them, and to work with the membership and the leadership of the union, and to pass on those, to pass on those leadership qualities to the younger people in the movement, in the union, in the labor, if you're in a labor union. So I don't know how to do it, but I really do wish that could happen, because they're all essential workers. I mean, and like I said earlier, people deserve the right to make a fair living, good hours, and good pay. So that's what, get out there and recruit.
I think there's there's enormous opportunity for labor to connect with young people. And Brother Msemaji, Ken Msemaji, did a fabulous job when he was working in the labor movement. And he was able to connect his labor movement with the movement of the community. And the community needs labor, labor needs the community. Brother Ken was responsible for getting hundreds of millions of dollars in good paying jobs for the area. And that was because of the efforts that he did of connecting with community and letting community know that we need help. We support us, go down to the city council or go to the city council, also the Board of Education. And because of that effort, Ken was victorious as well. The workers were victorious in getting hundreds of millions of dollars in San Diego. I've always felt that the best way to engage individuals is through service. And I think it would be great if labor had an office, a service center office in the middle of the community, where anybody in the community who had a problem could go to that office to get assistance, and regardless if he had money or not. And I think that with labor helping that way, they would be connected well with the community. The community would appreciate the fact that they're receiving services via the labor movement, and they would be connected to labor as well. And also that the young workers, or not workers, but our young individuals, our youth, would see the interaction between the two. And I think having seen that interaction, it would make it, it's a great example of the two working together and for the common good. So that would be, my wish for, I should also say that we do, through the Chavez Clubs, give labor an opportunity to support us, and through financial donations with our Las Mañanitas breakfast, which many labor organizations do, but we need more.
Thank you, panelists. Now I would like to ask another question. Many people who have worked as hard as the three of you will have retired by now. Why do you continue to work so hard to support us, the Chavistas?
There's wow, I could talk about that all day. Cesar changed my life in many ways forever. He nonviolence, one way, strong appreciation for education and family. In so many ways, church. He changed me forever, and that changed my family. And so we owe him. I owe him. And I owe all the people that around him that helped us. Even Marshall Gans even helped us later on. So that's one reason. I asked Cesar one time, how long is it going to take for farm workers to really get justice? He said a lifetime or two. I said, why? He said, because agribusiness has more money than God, and they're racist. Well, that applied to us as well. The power structure had enormous resources, and they were racist and sexist. So at this point, the only way I can pay back is by remaining involved. Cesar also taught us that the best thing we could do in life was to serve others. That was so right. So when I get up every day and do whatever I can do to support the Chavez clubs and education efforts, uh, that keeps me alive. Without that, I wouldn't be Ken anymore. Without that, my kids and grandkids and great grandkids would lose the opportunity to build their lives in a way so when they're running society, they'll do a much better job than we did. So that's some of the reasons why I stay involved. The other thing is my wife had a brain aneurysm 15 years ago. When she recovered, she continued to be involved in support. She passed away recently, but she would want me to continue the work we did together. My way of saying thanks to her, my way of letting her know I will not let you down is to continue to do this kind of work. So I could go on for hours about that, but we don't have hours, so I'll stop there unless there are other questions.
So for me, there's a saying that if you really like what you do, you don't feel like it's work, right? And I sort of feel that way. But now, as you so nicely and respectfully pointed out, Yasmin, we have been around a long time. So as we get a little bit older, it is, I do get tired more than I did back in the day. But I know that I can still run circles around a lot of young people as well, because I do love what I do. And for me, the Chavistas is the answer. You guys, I so respect all of the work that you do and the things that you aspire to do and the things that you're learning and the things that you don't even know that you're capable of doing. And you, by working with the Chavistas and with each other and taking on, especially the things that the Chavista Congress is taking on now, it's going to be a lifetime worth of education for you, whether you know it or not. And for me, I see you aspire to do the things that you're doing, and I feed off that. It gives me more energy than you'll ever know. I see Martin, who's you're in your sixth grade now, so middle school, but as an elementary school student, and I see Sanjana, middle school student, and I see Yasmin, you three, and you are great representatives of all of the Chavistas that we have in all of the schools in San Diego, and you guys are rocking it, and that's what gives me it's what gives me purpose, and it's what gives me energy. And also, I think the biggest thing is, especially at the beginning of the school year, especially when it's a young kid who's the very first time being a Chavista, when that Chavista in the elementary school level figures out, and it doesn't take long, usually takes 2 or 3 meetings, figures out that they are capable of doing the things that they don't even know they're capable of doing, when they realize that and their confidence is there, to me, that is success. It's success, and it will give that Chavista the tools that he or she needs as they move forward in life. So for me, I love it. I mean, if you took that away from me, I don't know, maybe I don't know what I would do. You guys give me energy. You give me hope, and more love than you'll ever know. And I thank you for that. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Linda's words are basically words that I had in mind. Just to
about this before, I promise.
So I'll just say a couple more words besides what Linda mentioned. Is that number one is, why would we want to retire when we're having fun? What would be the alternatives of retirement? I just turned 77 years old. I could be retired, but I would be miserable. Maybe not even be around, because in life you have to have purpose. And purpose with me, I know purpose with Ken, purpose with Linda, and those of us who work closely with the clubs. That's what keeps us going. It's not a money train. It's knowing that we get up in the morning, as Ken mentioned, and that we have 500 Chavistas out there that we can have something to do, make some change in their life about they becoming the future leaders of San Diego. And we're grateful that the Chavistas, and we're very appreciative that you guys as Chavistas allow us to hang around and to witness your growth. We have Chavistas who started in elementary school, middle school, high school. They've gone to college. Now they returned from college. They're working and they're leading. Many of you will be doing the same. So it would be a terrible trade to trade retirement for what we do now. And it kind of leads me to, and this will be my last words here, to a discussion we had one night at a reunion of Linda's high school class. And so we're sitting around the table and there's this one individual who was very, very what we call toxic. He was talking about, oh, well, you know, I've been working 8 years for this business I'm working with, and I've hated every minute of working there. And he says, but you know what? He says, I only have 12 more years and then I'll be able to retire and do the things that I want to do. And so as we were driving home, Linda and I said, man, that guy was really toxic. I said, you know, with me, if it's 1 minute in a job and it doesn't turn me on, I'm gone, right? So I'm saying, well, but I said, he did say something that was interesting. He said he only had 12 more years to go, and then he's going to retire and do what he wants to do. Linda and I have been blessed that everything that we've done as a married couple, we've done because that's what we chose to do. And same thing in retirement. You know, we would not be able to do what we do if we were retired. I don't know. I don't know what life would look like at that point.
If I could, there's one last thing I'd like to say. Carlos mentioned he was 77. He is 77. I'm 75. We sacrificed a lot to do the work we've done over our lifetime, but we did that willingly. But nevertheless, it was a sacrifice. You all, the Chavistas, and other young people who are doing the kind of things you're doing, justifies our life. If it wasn't for you, we wasted it. Because of you, Chavistas, you young people, you've justified our lives and our existence and our contributions and given us the hope that you're going to go way beyond what we did in the fight for justice.
Okay, so that was great. So, I want to thank the panelists, but like I said earlier, I have this thing about control. So I want to ask the last question. I'm going to take my, because I'm the executive director, I can do this. So I have a question for Sanjana, Martin, and for Yasmin. So what did each of you learn today that inspires you to want to make the world a better place for workers? And I think I will ask anybody who wants to go first. So whoever goes first, you choose the next person and then, no, I tell you what, let's do this. I'm sorry. Let's do Martin first. We'll do Sanjana second, and we'll do Yasmin. Okay, so Martin, what did you learn today that inspires you to want to make the world a better place for workers?
I thought maybe like starting a campaign for the workers, so they have like rights.
I think there's probably some labor unions out there who ought to think about putting you on their policy committee making board or something.
Yeah. What organizer?
Yeah, make you a top organizer.
Yeah, organizer.
You have a whole 3 minutes if you want. So if you want to just keep, if you want to expand on that a little bit, feel free.
No.
You may want to jump back in later.
Okay, so Sanjana?
Yeah.
Well, I think I was I was really, really inspired by all of you guys' stories and all like messages and lessons that you guys shared. And also just seeing like all of the Chavista values. Like I haven't been a Chavista for very long, but the values that I've learned and stuff through the clubs and seeing that like really reflected in all of your guys' work and everything that you do even now, like in real life, it really like showed me like what how much you can accomplish if you keep that in mind. And so I'm really inspired by all of it. And I think it's like a really big injustice that there's all of these like workers who work so hard every day and they understand like what the importance of that labor is, and yet they still have to suffer while other people don't. So I don't think anybody should have to go through that. And there I think the least I can do to help is to like show that same kind of resilience that you guys talked about, and strength, and just persevere and help to make the world a better place for them, because it's a really big injustice. So I just want to say I'm like eager to carry on your guys' work. But thank you so much, because I was really, really inspired by everything that you guys said. Like I'm so like honored that I get to just like join this club and be a part of this and like hear your guys' stories, because I never imagined that I'd be able to do that.
Thank you, Miha. Thank you so much, Sanjana. So Yasmin?
I would just like the three of you guys like inspired me more, and just like to want to keep working hard to help our communities. And as Sanjana said, like I feel really honored to be part of the Chavistas and having Carlos and Linda and Ken and also Richard like with us and helping us like just to help people and giving back to our communities as Linda and Carlos and Ken did. And for me, like what I took out from this conversation and from this talk today, it was like if you use like your sacrifices as motivation, like you can achieve all your goals. And for me, this like means a lot, because I wouldn't imagine myself here now like a year before, because I'm kind of new to the Chavistas and this is my first year, but I'm really grateful for being here and for having all of our Chavistas. And it's just mean a lot to me for being part of the Chavistas, because they have helped me a lot. Yeah.
Okay, well, Martine, did you want to add anything, honey? Are you a man of few words?
Like maybe start a policy like that farm workers or workers need a little bit more like money, like to, because they used to not get paid a lot. They used to get like cents. So now I think they need like a little bit more money or like a lot. So that's my idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I can tell that you have workers in your heart and in your mind, and that you want to move forward and make sure that workers are protected, right, and respected the way they should be. That's one of our huge values. So Jasmine, I guess I'll let you close it out, unless you guys have questions. We have a few minutes, so if anybody wants to do a closing statement, panelists or interviewers, please do so.
One of the things that is very important, I believe, is Cesar's values. The Chavez Clubs, as you all know, is based on his values. Those of us who have been doing this work, our lives are based on those values. So the proper values and vision is very important. But what's also important is to understand organizing. People who go around loosely calling themselves organizers might be nice people, and at best they're just mobilizers. Organizing is a human behavioral art and science. And just like it's a science to become a lawyer or a doctor or a plumber, it's a science and needs to be respected as such. And so we can make our progress with the ability to be more successful in what we do. Our job as organizers is to get people to do something they never thought they would do, or they thought they would never do, and let them learn how to do it for themselves and make progress for their communities. So don't forget, values, vision, science.
And so before Yasmin, unless anybody else has another comment or something, before Yasmin closes it out, I'd just like to remind everybody, and I know Yasmin's going to thank all our listeners, but I want to also remind people to follow us on Facebook and to stay up to date on the Chavistas' latest news and events, because we're really proud of the work you guys are doing, Chavistas, and we want to share it with the world. So with that being said, Yasmin, if you'd like to close it out.
Yes. I would just like to thank you to our panelists and interviewers, and thank you to everyone who listened to our conversation today. And just to remember that sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.
Thank you very, very much, everybody.